Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the cinema. This is our Cinemacast podcast, movie review podcast. You're watching us right here on our YouTube channel, Arrow Entertainment, and our TikTok. And we're also on twitch.tv/ArrowENT if you guys are following us over there to watch our content as well. So, today's topic, today's feature, oh boy. What is it about movie studios wanting to remake or do sequels to already established movies of a cult classic genre, not genre, but a cult classic, like, I don't know what to call it, like cult classic movies. I don't even know what type of group to put them in. I was almost getting ready to say like legendary movies, but they're not they're legendary in a sense of what makes them such a classic or a cult classic or even a sleeper hit at that. And Salem's Lot, well, the original Salem's Lot to begin with was I want to say a cult classic or a sleeper hit in a sense of its own purity, if you can call it that. Now, when Salem's Lot released, and I believe it was so the novel came out in 1975. The novel was written by Stephen King, and the original movie came out, I believe, in 1979. I believe it was, and it came out as a two-part TV miniseries, kind of like Stephen King's It. Well, a lot of Stephen King movies that came out, they all went directly to television as miniseries movies. And the only ones that we really truly know about is Salem's Lot, Stephen King's It, and a few other obscure ones based off of other novels of his. But there were some movies that were released in theaters, of course, like Stephen King's Silver Bullet, Pet Sematary, and such. Even Christine was like a last minute kind of thing because Stephen King, he was writing the book and they wanted a movie based off the book. So while he was writing the book, or he was just about finishing the novel up, that's when production studios went into play and the movie went into productions. John Carpenter was directing it. And you had the movie come out, it was a little bit different than a book, but it was like everybody wanted, at the time it was like Stephen King's writing novels, let's make movies to go along with them, Maximum Overdrive and such. And usually a lot of Stephen King movies are hit or miss. Even like movies like The Shining, Stanley Kubrick directed The Shining, and it was said that Stephen King did not like his rendition of the movie. However, the movie became a cult classic amongst a lot of people. A lot of people loved The Shining, loved the mysteries and the terrifying atmosphere of this motel, and just the overall tone of the movie, that Stanley Kubrick put into play. And it was just a phenomenal movie. And, Stephen King, he was not a fan of it. He said they butchered it and such. I forgot what it was. But, that's with a lot of movies nowadays. When movie studios and you got a direction for a movie based off a novelization of something, there's going to be a lot of differences. That's why a lot of people choose to read the books rather than see the movie, or they prefer the book over the movie, such as, Stephen King's It, or maybe novels like, Jurassic Park and such. And then comes along a movie, Salem's Lot. Like I said, it was a two-part miniseries, which was, if you put them together, it's a 4-hour movie. Stephen King's It was like 3 or 4 hours long itself. Well, you gotta tack on commercial breaks and such. But yeah, this movie is like 4 hours long. There was even a version of the movie that was released, I think, to theaters or to video, that was shortened down to 2 hours and some, just to cut out a lot of different scenes to fit it down to at least around a 2-hour mark. And a lot of people preferred it that way, and then there's others that kind of preferred it, the 4-hour version, because there's a lot to be told in that movie. And with this remake, this one, it did not go directly to theaters. This one was slated for streaming services, Max, or Cinemax if you call it that. So before I get into the plot of it a little bit, because the plot is definitely a little bit more different, I'm going to talk about the release for this movie, which is an interesting one at that, because they were talking about doing this for the last 5 to 6 years. And Salem's Lot was originally set to be released in theaters September 9th, 2022, the post-Labor Day weekend that had been a successful for the studio's past horror releases, but it was delayed till April 21st, 2023, due to COVID-related delays in the post-production realm before its release date to The Evil Dead Rise, which was another good movie right there. If you're into the Evil Dead franchise, they are all pretty good in their sense, minus Bruce Campbell in that entry, but they are still pretty good movies. There was a growing concern that the project would be scrapped like Coyote versus Acme or Batgirl, which were canceled November 9th, 2022 and August 3rd, 2022. Remember that? They were canceling movies at Warner Brothers. They had movies that were already in production. They were just about finished. There were some actors and directors, and there's several people that got to see the final film, and they're like, why did they scrap this? Why did they scrap something like Batgirl? Like, how many movies do we have that are Batman? We have like a dozen movies just about with Batman. Or how about Coyote versus Acme? This was going to be I guess it was going to be a live action Wile E. Coyote movie. I have no idea, but Warner Brothers, they were making these movies, and then they just said, no, let's scrap it because it's not going to make us any money. Because it's like nowadays, you got to figure, between 2020 and 2022 or 23, you had the pandemic that was still on the play. There were people that were still afraid of going out to movies. They were staying home. They were watching streaming services. So it's like, okay, you film a movie, you put it to a streaming service, you're still going to make money off of it. You're not going to make theater sales. But then, theaters started opening up and more movies started going into the theaters. And then you have people that are going to theaters to see them, even though today it's kind of killed off a little bit. Theaters are not really quite packed as they used to be, for a lot of movies as such. But, this one could have, it could have been on the table, could have been in a scrapyard, along with movies like, Batgirl and Coyote versus Acme. But it's like, it's almost like when gaming production companies make a game or have an idea to make a video game, and then they just scrap it right out the table. It's like, that's money wasted too. That's money lost. Like, imagine how much money they put into making these movies, and they already lost a whole production's worth of money. They could have put $2 million into a movie, and they probably almost nearly finished it, and then be like, nope, let's scrap it. So you just lost $2 million right there. That's something that Warner Brothers really has to take into account. So, and also retrospectively, along with Scoob Holiday Haunt, despite some of them being nearly completely photographed and deep into post-production, these films were ultimately treated as tax write-offs for the production company in context of Warner Brothers Discovery restructuring. However, by October 2023, Warner Brothers was considering releasing the film on Max due to the 2023 SAG-AFTRA strike. Remember that? The writer's strike? Creating a growing need for Max content, although spokesperson stated that no decision regarding the film's future distribution plans had been made yet. Then in February of this year, 2024, King questioned why there still was no confirmed release plan for this film, stating that he is not sure why Warner Brothers is holding it back. Not like it's embarrassing or anything. Who knows? I just write the fucking things. Doberman believes that this escalation in King's speech contributed to the eventually finalization. In March, Warner Brothers confirmed that it would be released on Max, and in August, it was scheduled for an October 2024 release. So this has been going on for quite some time with trying to release this film. Before broader accessibility, it was the opening film at Beyond Fest, and September 25th, 2024, the film was then released exclusively OTT October 3rd, releasing Salem's Lot in October ahead of Nosferatu in December. Yes, the movie Nosferatu, which is a a remake of the classic Nosferatu starring Bill Skarsgård. That comes out in December. I think it comes out Christmas Day, actually. And on Max instead of in theaters, helped avoid competition between the two films, preventing a potential split in ticket sales and viewerships. So I guess they thought ahead and tried to be like, okay, we're just gonna release one on streaming and one in theater, because what if one does terrible, in theaters also, you could lose money there as well. But I guess it's a smart strategy that they do this, because you got two vampire-based movies that are releasing within a 3-month period of each other. The Film Distributor Association reported that it would be theatrically released in the United Kingdom and Ireland October 11th. Residents in the UK do not have access to Max due to existing agreements. Okay, somebody made a typo there with that sentence. Access to Max due to existing agreements ain't in between Warner Brothers and Sky. Sky Entertainment, I guess it is, the exclusive distributor of HBO content in the UK. That does not expire until late 2025. So that is the release hell that this movie had been through. And especially, that was just released. The production was probably a little bit more different, but I'm not going to get into that, really. I want to get into the movie. So if you guys have yet to see this movie, this remake of Salem's Lot, I recommend you guys go maybe get a free trial to Max, or pay for a month of Max, or even if you already got Max, go check out the movie on Max and then come back and watch the review, like I always tell everybody who watches these reviews. So, yes, as I stated, this is a vampire horror movie, and it is, it's a remake of the 1971 classic Salem's Lot, which also had a sequel to it, Return to Salem's Lot, which was not as good, but people did enjoy for what it was. But Salem's Lot, it takes place in a little place, Jerusalem. I think it was Jerusalem, Maine, or Massachusetts, or whatever. It's somewhere in the upper northeast, East Coast. And that's usually where a lot of Stephen King films are. That's where usually a lot of them take place. It's like in Maine or Massachusetts, anywhere up there. It's just weird. It's funny, but that's where he likes to base a lot of his novelizations from. So there is a lot of elements that this does borrow from the novel and from the original movie. So if you did not read the novel and you've watched the original movie, there is a lot that is taken from it. They did change maybe a couple characters here and there. There's a little boy in this film. His name is Mark Petrie. Mark. He is portrayed by Jordan Preston Carter, a young black boy. Where in the original movie he was white, so they did a different casting kind of thing. But then again, who cares? Who really cares? Just put the character in there. Boom, you got it. So you do have some memorable scenes, like the meeting at the kitchen table with the boy, and then the vampire comes in and tries to kill everybody off. Basically, you have scenes like that. You have the scene where Mark is in bed at night, and his friend who had been a victim to the vampire, he's floating outside his window asking him to let him in and such. So you do have some familiar scenes that are remade for this account. And it does it pretty well. I'm going to say it does it pretty well, especially with the characters. And then you got the main character, Ben Mears. He's portrayed by what's his name, Lewis Pullman, and that's an actor I never really heard of before. He's in his 30s, but I did see him in a couple of movies like Strangers, Pray at Night. There is one actress in this film. Alfre Woodard. Yeah, Alfre Woodard. Now, in this movie, she looks to be about in her 40s. She looks pretty young, in her 40s or 50s, maybe, right? Alfre Woodard is actually 71 years old. When I read up on her, I was like, oh my God, I did not realize she was that old. But she was in some movies that I do recall seeing. And maybe you guys seen some of them. Okay, so if you've seen the movie Scrooged with Bill Murray, Her character's Grace in there. I remember seeing her in that movie. There was another, okay, Star Trek First Contact. If you guys are Star Trek fans, she played the character Lily in that film. I've seen her in that. She was in the movie The Brave Little Toaster. She was Maisie in there. Let's see. She was in Love and Basketball, K-Pax, Dinosaur, Primal Fear. I'm just reading a whole bunch of different movies off the top of my head with this actress. But yeah, she's well known. She's probably the only actress that I recognize out of everybody in this movie, basically, which is it's something, you know. Like you got to get a movie out there that doesn't have a whole lot of actors and actresses that you don't really know. But there's another one that is in this film, and he sadly he doesn't have a whole lot of scenes in the movie. Is actor William Sadler. And William Sadler, you know, he's been in quite a bit of sci-fi, horror, action movies himself. Especially, you know, being this is a horror movie. He was in a horror movie, Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight. God, he's 74 years old. Wow. But yeah, William Sadler and Alfred Woodard, those are the only two that I recognize in this film. Everybody else is pretty much new to me, even though they had a few film credits that I did see. I just don't quite remember seeing them in there. You know, like, well, those movies I only see maybe, I don't know, once or twice, just not long enough to remember the whole thing. But yeah, this movie, you know, it takes place in the town of Jerusalem's Lot, just like in the book, just like in the miniseries and all. And you got writer Ben Mears. He returns to his hometown. You know, you got to think back. You know, they're doing this, you know, piece by piece, just how they did in the novel and in the miniseries, with only a few twists to it. And he comes to town. He comes back to town. He grew up there when he was a child, and he left out. And he came back to write a book about his childhood. He then befriends and starts a romantic relationship with a woman named Susan, who you do see in the original film. But then they start taking notice to it. There's a lot of things that start going on within this town. And of course, he's one of the, you know, like, maybe not the prime suspect, but, you know, a couple kids end up missing, and one of them ends up dead and buried, but then, you know, comes back to life. So then, you know, as things weird things starts happening around town. You know, you start seeing people either getting killed off or turned into vampires. And you have this character. His name is Kurt Barlow. Kurt Barlow, you know, he was the main vampire, you know, in the novel and in the original. You remember him. So he is basically recruiting people and turning them into vampires. He's trying to do them go from town to town, you know, infecting all the townspeople. And until you got this one last group of people that know exactly what's going on, including a priest. And you got the little boy, you know, Mark. And you got the writer, you know. So you got this group of people who end up being the last of them that, you know, have to go out and kill vampires. And of course, you know, the movie does end with them taking out the lead vampire, and pretty much a lot of the other vampires, in a sense. You know, the whole town is full of vampires. But here is where this movie kind of takes a turn a little bit, where when you watch the original miniseries, it kind of Tarantino's itself a little bit. This is before movies like Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs, you know, where everybody has that quote where it's like, okay, this movie is Tarantino'd itself. It plays the ending before the rest of the movie, and you learn your way up. You know, you go, okay, we just saw the ending, we saw the most fucked up part of the movie, what led up to this point, and then you get into the actual movie itself, that kind of thing. So that's what the original Salem's Lot movie did, was you had Mears, and you had this boy Mark, and they're in the basement of this house looking to kill head vampire Barlow. But then it goes back, okay, 2 years prior to that. So then you got a story that leads up over the next couple years, leading up to that point, with them killing off the main vampire. It doesn't happen this time around. This time around, even though Barlow and his coffin were in the basement of this creepy old house, but there's a scene in there where the house ends up disappearing, and they find a new spot for Barlow to sit at. And that is a drive-in movie theater, which does play a part in the movie, of course, along with all the other townspeople that were turned into vampires. And there's a clever scene. I'm not gonna spoil it for you guys. But let's just say it takes place in a movie theater, a drive-in movie theater, and it involves Barlow and all the. It's just the scenery, and this whole scene itself is much different than it was in the miniseries. And I think they did it cleverly with this one to pretty much put an end to the movie. And it does end on a pretty decent note, where Ben does leave town with this young boy, after, killing off Barlow, and then, everything's just pretty quiet. It's like the whole town is just like gone. Yeah, everybody was turned into vampires. Nobody turned back or anything. So, like I said, this is your typical vampire movie. And you don't see too many movies that are like that really anymore. You do see vampire movies, but they're not subtle like this one, where it's like, yes, this is your traditional vampire movie where, yes, you stake them through the heart, the cross hurts them, sunlight hurts them, garlic hurts them, that kind of thing. Traditional vampire, remedies to kill a vampire, deter a vampire, that kind of thing. But with this one, I feel like, and a lot of people feel the same way, with it being shortened down to 2 hours, cramming everything from the original novel and the original story into a 2-hour period. A lot of people feel like it was kind of rushed through. There wasn't a whole lot of time for a lot of the plot to breathe. There wasn't a lot of time to get some character development with the other characters involved. Like I said, William Sadler, he only has maybe about 5-6 minutes screen time in this entire movie. And the main focus is usually on the main actor, Ben. But then you got the boy who is supposed to be part of the story himself, Mark. He's supposed to be another titular part of the film, which he ends up becoming that about halfway through, even though he is seen, in different segments, from pretty much from beginning to end. But it's almost like his tale, his storyline is cut short and not fully explained very well. You don't know if he's like moved right into town. You don't know anything about his family until very late, and you only see them for maybe about 3 or 4 minutes. So there is a lot of stuff that maybe could have fit in there, in a sense, if they would have given it maybe another 10 minutes for this movie, but they shortened it down to an hour and 58 minutes or something like that. And they just took out a lot of different contexts. So they just didn't really elaborate a lot in the remake of what was in the miniseries or in the book. There was a lot of stuff that was missing from it. There was a lot of stuff that they could have probably did a little bit more better with. But, they probably had just a big enough budget to fit in there, for 113 minutes of runtime. Just get in there, just barely. So, and that's another thing that I did see a lot of people comment on, was like, even though it's 2 hours long, it just feels short. It just feels like everything was kind of rushed through. It was like, okay, this scene, boom. It's a tradition. It's just a regular vampire movie. We're making it that, you got a vampire who's turning people into other vampires in town. You know who it is already. If you read the novel, seen the miniseries, whatever. This is what happened. That's what happened. I feel like this movie is a little bit more for, well, I guess it depends. I think it's a little bit more if you're in the modern audience and you're in the mood for a vampire movie, you'll probably watch this movie and be like, it was good for what it was. But then again, a lot of the modern audience is probably looking at this movie and be like, it's too confusing, because who's this Barlow? Who's this guy who's his slave, who's bringing him people for this and that? Which, of course, that is established later on, in a scene where you got these, this one guy who's a school teacher, and you got the other kid, Mark, who they're big into studying vampires. It's just a real coincidental moment. You got these two people that are studying vampires, and they know everything that is to know about vampires, what they do, how to tell them apart, how to kill them, and such like that. It's like, okay, let's go. It's almost like watching, I don't want to say a dull, but I guess you could say it's a dull version of the Lost Boys, basically. It's like watching a more toned down version of the Lost Boys. Lost Boys was amazing, an amazing 80s vampire horror movie. It really was. The Corys, Corey Haim, Corey Feldman in there. They play, him and his, I forgot who the other kid was, the Frog Brothers. They were all about vampires. They were teaching, Corey Haim's character about vampires. Hey, your brother's a vampire now. We got to take him out. That kind of thing. That's what I feel like with this movie here. Who directed it here? Gary Dauberman. Okay, and it was also produced by James Wan. You guys may know him. He's worked on the Saw franchise and the Conjuring franchise along with others. But yeah, that's all this movie feels like is a toned down version of the Lost Boys in a sense. Put in there for 2 hours. They crammed in a lot of stuff from this movie, from the miniseries and from the novel for it. That's pretty much all it is. Now, those who have seen the miniseries, now I've seen the miniseries myself. I can't remember if I watched the 2-hour version or the 4-hour version, but I will say I did fall asleep a couple times through it. Like, don't get me wrong, I think it was just the time and setting where I was just watching it, and I wasn't ready for it in the sense of that moment, But yeah, it tends to drag a little bit. That kind of movie does drag. Now, there's a lot of people that love it because it's very creepy. It's disturbing. There's a lot of scenes in there that still freak people out to this day. It's understandable. Just like The Exorcist. The Exorcist still scares the hell out of people to this day, and it's titled the scariest movie of all time, But, that never comes down to anything nowadays, because they always make it horror movies, and there's always debates of what's the scariest movie out there. But I will say, with Salem's Lot, with this new rendition, this remake of Salem's Lot, to me, I think it's a decent entry into the remakes for any Stephen King movie nowadays. Now, the overall tone of the movie, the overall production tone of the movie, it does have that feel of movies like Dr. Sleep and the remake for Stephen King's It. It just has that overall, it's not like a grainy kind of feeling, but it's almost like it's got a greenish gray kind of tone to it. Yeah, if you've seen the movie Dr. Sleep, or if you've seen Stephen King's It, like the remakes, then you'll know just the cinematography of how the movie is filmed and presented and produced. Just the overall production of the movie. That just seems like the overall tone that Warner Brothers is using for Stephen King remakes. You already had Stephen King's It. You already had Dr. Sleep. Dr. Sleep was actually a sequel to The Shining, in which Stephen King wrote the book several years later because people were wanting a follow-up to The Shining. I don't know why, but he did. He wrote it. People adored it. Warner Brothers went into production with a few production companies and some producers and all. Got a director for it. They made Dr. Sleep. Dr. Sleep, another fantastic movie, a great entry to The Shining, as a sequel. I recommend seeing that too. I might do a review on that as well. I'm going to have to re-watch it just to get a really more accurate depiction once again, because it's been a couple years since I've seen it. So what do I think about Salem's Lot? It's a decent watch. It's a good watch. I think there are people that may enjoy this movie. They may like this movie for what it is. There may be some people that it could piss off easily because of the direction it went and how it went. But let's look at some of the critical responses on it. So anyway, everybody knows how I feel about Rotten Tomatoes. If you go off of Rotten Tomatoes, that's your opinion. That's you. Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 44% of 86 critics who reviewed it, on an average of 5.3 out of 10. The website successes read, an old-fashioned spook fest, this Salem's Lot won't be the definitive adaptation of Stephen King's famed vampire tale, but it makes for a solid reintroduction to a new generation of audiences. John Corngut of Dread Central awarded it 2 stars out of 5 and wrote, despite its occasional scares and striking style, The adaptation lacks any of the terror and emotional depth of its Stephen King source material. Bloody Disgusting, Megan Navarro gave it a 2 out of 5 star, noting that it's an adaptation that feels heavily tampered with, gutting all of the story and character development solely in favor of vampire scares. And I will agree with that. I definitely will agree with that. Where the miniseries, feeding off the book, coming off the book, there was a lot of story to it. There's a lot of character development. Though, just one thing I did note a little bit earlier on with the character development, there was not enough time for character development with some of these characters in the movie. They were just put in there. Some were, killed off or thrown away or what. Throwable characters, throwaway characters, basically. But yeah, they pretty much gutted what made the movie great and just turned this into just another ordinary vampire movie, giving it the sense. It's like, hey, this is how vampires really are, kids. This is how you kill vampires. This is a standard vampire tale, just like Dracula kind of thing. This isn't Twilight. This isn't one of those. I did a review for The Shed about vampire hiding in the shed, that kind of thing. It's nothing like that. This is like your standard. Okay, this is a vampire-esque movie where there's not too much character development. There's not too much story. It's just, let's get into it. There's a vampire in town. This person coming to the right. Something going on. It's terrifying. This happened. That kind of thing. So that's basically what this movie is. There's not a whole lot of room to explain stuff. It's just, let's get right into it. Let's entertain people. Let's not drag it out because, hey, nowadays, today's generation of moviegoers, horror buffs, they don't want a 4-hour horror movie to drag out. Oh, no, they want something as simple as maybe 90 minutes to close to 2 hours, and that's it. Whereas back in the day, our parents and us very early on, we had a great attention span when it came to watching movies in great detail and appreciating them for more than just a scare. But, and that's how I feel. Like, I enjoy a good movie for its story, its characters. If it still gives a good scare, yes, indeed. That's always, like, not really a given, but I think the given part is the story and the character development, or the characters in the story. I like a good movie with a good story, especially when it comes to horror. And with this one, I feel like since I already seen Salem's Lot, since I already know the overall story to it, I went into this movie with low expectations because I heard bad things about it. In a sense, I heard it wasn't that great, but I went into it and, I recognized a lot of the scenes, a lot of character names. I'm like, okay, this is, I know where I'm going with this movie. And I did end up enjoying it. I really did end up enjoying this remake of Salem's Lot. Now, like I said, maybe not a lot of people will enjoy it as I did. I will say, if you want to watch it, it's a good once over. It really is. Check it out, give it a view, see what you like about it, and let us know. So, on that note, guys, I'm going to go ahead and head on out of here. Thank you for joining me today for today's feature. Oh, and one last thing, and I keep forgetting to do it with some of my reviews. My rating for Salem's Lot, guys, I give this a 7 out of 10. That's what I gave it on Twitter this morning when I watched it. So, yes, I give this movie a 7 out of 10. Check it out. But, yeah, that's it, guys. Thank you for joining me today for today's feature, which is Salem's Lot. Hope you guys enjoyed the review. What did you guys think about it? Did you see Salem's Lot 2024? What did you like about it? What did you hate about it? Let us know down in the comments section. And until next time, guys, we'll catch you right back here at the cinema.